Are we rocking and rolling? Nolan, give me the thumbs up. Can't see it, Connor, but Nolan gave me the thumbs up. You said we sound good, so now you do a little,
Top.
do a little bit of chopping it up too. We'll see if the audio works. But we tried this the other day, and ended up becoming just an epic story about USA hockey that you told me fired me up into a secondary lift, and here we are on Monday. So cheers to
I love that.
a
I
Monday
love that.
podcast with you. So no, folks, we got Connor Carrick with us today, who's with the New Jersey Devils. I came across Connor. At this point, I think I just started watching you a little bit. Seems like the guy was super dialed in, and then I started talking to you, and I was like, this guy's an absolute G, so let's get the guy on the MindStrong Project podcast, and let's chop up some conversation. So where this goes, I don't know, but we will let it sink in deep. And I know when we talked a little bit before the podcast, it's kind of cool to hear your story. So I think to start there and kind of develop how you developed your mind, how you developed your mindset, how you developed training styles, and what that sort of correlated into the moment will be a fascinating thing. But before we get into that, Connor, thanks for joining us today, man, and being a part of the MindStrong Project podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, Harv. Let's let it fly, man. Let's get after it and dig some stuff up, man.
I love it. Let's let it rip. So the cool thing with Connor is that you actually, I didn't talk about this with you the other day, but you were with the Illinois Sparks playing baseball growing up, correct? So I don't know if you ever remember, I wouldn't have played against you, but do you ever remember the name A Green baseball out of Michigan? It would have.
Hey, Green, no.
So, because I
I
remember
don't.
playing the
I,
Sparks.
I quit pretty early.
Okay.
I stopped playing around. Oh man, so it would have been uh, 2 years before the U.S. development team, which I went into it in 2010. So I probably would have quit about 2008. I was 14.
Okay, sure. Because the Sparks are loaded, right? I mean,
Oh,
so
yeah, we
you were
were sick.
playing good baseball. So there's nothing to be said of that. And so now this is the cool thing, because we'll talk about USA development, and that'll be fun. But if you were playing in that sort of circuit, you had to have been pretty good at baseball and hockey, kind of at the same level, right? When you were growing up.
Yeah, I was self-proclaimed, but I was the real deal about in
Yeah.
baseball. We had a lot of Division I commitments. A couple guys make the Under Armour,
Mm-hmm.
All-American team or whatever it's called. I think Kyle Funkhauser, he joined the year I left, or basically I broke my leg at one of these USA Hockey festivals we'll
Yeah.
talk about, and that kind of squashed my dreams to continue to play baseball. Um, I loved it. I was always jamming. I was an athletic kid. I was always playing, as many sports as, my family could afford financially and,
Yeah.
and time, perspective. And I loved baseball, but it was always a game. I worked very hard. I brought all my habits over from hockey,
Mm-hmm.
but in hockey, like I was a Marine.
Yeah.
It was game on. There was just more bite, more motivation, more certainty. I
Yeah.
had it in my backbone that I was going to play, in the NHL, or really the goal at a young age was Division I, and
Yeah.
in Chicago hockey, it wasn't even a conversation to really play in the NHL at the
Yeah.
time. But I loved baseball, and I definitely borrowed a lot of the athletic traits and just sort of the mental reframing. It's a sport of failure,
Yeah.
which is so talked about. I love baseball, man. I miss it.
Well, so you said something fascinating there that actually kind of took my question away, because I grew up in Michigan, and then now I live in Minnesota. So I
Mhm.
thought Michigan hockey was big until I moved to Minnesota. And now it's,
Yeah.
like, oh, Michigan hockey's JV compared to it out here. And then I had a perspective of USA hockey being in Ann Arbor. I was probably 20 minutes away from that in Farmington. And I knew some
Mhm.
guys who played for USA. So I saw the intensity of that, but it was just something that I saw, made sense. Hockey guys are hockey guys. And then you just touched on Chicago. And I was going to ask, is Chicago a hotbed for hockey? Because it is a hotbed for baseball, which is also kind of weird. And whenever we played
Mhm.
Chicago teams, Illinois teams, and growing up in sports, I mean, they were tough squads. But hockey, I don't have much of a background of that. Is hockey
It's getting there.
relevant? Yeah.
It's getting there. So I grew up on the south side of the city, and there's basically 4 AAA charters, they
Mm-hmm.
call them, for youth hockey, and that'll produce most of your players. We don't have the high school system that you do up in Minnesota,
Yeah.
and we don't have the AAA quantity of quality players
Mm-hmm.
that Michigan has.
Mm-hmm.
But the Blackhawks, when I grew up, was really kind of the dark ages. There was a period where They wouldn't televise home games. The team was really struggling. The stadium, there was no one at the games. The team kind of stunk. And then, there was a renaissance, when the team was handed down to the current owner. I know it's the Wirtz family, but I forget all their names. And it really rebirthed the strength of hockey in the city of Chicago, and it's continuing to grow, but it's not nearly what Michigan is yet, and it's definitely not what it is in Minnesota.
Yeah, so when you go, and it's crazy because you're in the middle of it, so you wouldn't. I guess why is that? I mean, my question just purely is why is that not a Michigan or Minnesota? Because it's like right in the middle of it, and then Wisconsin's pretty good too, right? Are they at that level or not?
Wisconsin's good, not nearly. I don't think as good as Chicago either.
Okay.
I think it's accessibility to ice. Just in Minnesota, you drive around. There's a basketball court, and then there's like boards, for
Everywhere.
when the ice freezes over in the winter.
Yeah.
And I think just culturally, the access, more people know more people that like tend to play up in Minnesota. In Chicago, and I really do think that those sort of dark ages of the Blackhawks really killed hockey in this town. It was never talked about. Like when I grew up, I struggled to find teammates to train with. Like we lived on the south side, we had some good players, but just from a pure numbers perspective, like I went to a high school. I grew up in Orland Park, Illinois. The town's like 65,000 people.
Yeah.
I went to a big high school, Carl Sandburg High School, before the U.S. development team there. And, we had whatever it was, 5,000, 6,000 kids. And there were like 4 kids in the whole school that played AAA.
Wow.
And I'm not even talking about my age. I'm talking, freshman,
Everywhere
senior, high school.
Right.
So, but all of a sudden it was like my middle of my freshman and the sophomore year, the Blackhawks started to get really good. Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, some of the stars that have, resurrected the organization, started to really make a name for themselves. The Winter Classic versus Detroit was a huge stepping stone. And now these younger kids, really my birth year, honestly. So I'm a 94 birth year. That's kind of how we identify in hockey, right? Because you 94s play with 94s, and it's how we describe our age. In our 94 birth year, we have myself, Ryan Hartman, who I played with at the U.S. development team, and in the OHL again with Plymouth, the Plymouth Whalers, which went close to where you're at in Farmington. Vinny Hinostroza, Alexander Galchenyuk actually came back from Russia and played in Chicago AAA that year. So he'd go to the OHL. So we had quite a few NHLers from our birth year, and it's continued to get stronger ever since.
Yeah, so and for now, we've heard it a few times now. You're in high school, and this is something that Connor did that we chirped about and chalked it up a little bit last weekend. But you go to USA Development, which is like in my mind, you can take it and run with this and explain it deeper. It's like the Taj Mahal of high school hockey. You get invited there, things are looking pretty good, right? That's a pretty good shot at it, and it seems like, to everyone that I've met in the hockey community that got a chance to play there, it seemed like a no-brainer. You get that call, you just go, and you see what you're capable of if you're trying to play in the NHL and whatnot. But you're talking about being in the middle of your high school career, changing states, living. You guys live with billet families, right? We call them host families in baseball. You guys live with another family. They set you up. You go to a different high school, and you go there to play hockey. So you're making a choice at a young age to go, this is where I'm going. I'm going to try to trace this down. I'm now also going to play with some of the best players in the country, and I'm going to support my country and do that while you're in high school, which is rather fascinating to me, just purely to put your mind in a high school student's body, in a high school student's mind, and know, 1, you had to make a decision. 2, you had to believe in yourself. And then 3, the level of competition, I've got to imagine, goes from wherever you were at, goes to boom in a day. So you can take it and talk about all those things. And obviously you lived it, so you know what happened. But run me through that. Run me through when you're a young kid, you're growing up, you're obviously pretty successful, and then you get this opportunity to play for Team USA and move to Michigan. How did that process look? And then what was the transformation as you got into it?
Harvey, it was unreal. And to go back, probably knew I was serious. I talked about, taking hockey more seriously than baseball. Probably age 9 or 10, I made the jump to play. I was playing with my friends, play up a year and play a higher level of travel. And there was a conversation with my dad, which is, hey, playing sports, if you want to learn a sport and you want to be with your friends, Connor, you're 9. I have no problem. But they did. My dad did talk to me like an adult and said, or there's this more aggressive route. how serious you want to take this game, kid?
Sure.
And I was hungry at 9 or 10. I was very much a player that if I saw something on YouTube, if I read about Jonathan Tay's shooting pucks before school, that's what I did.
Yeah.
I'd hear about, they did this YouTube series growing up on Evgeny Malkin rehabbing from an injury and doing all these outdoor training videos where his trainer went over to Russia. It was like, that's what I was doing from then on. So stayed in that youth hockey model in the south side of Chicago, played for the Chicago Fury was the name. All the way up until like 14, 15, you start to go to these summer USA hockey camps that we talked about on the phone. Mm-hmm. And you go through like a state level where they evaluate the best players. You get selected to go to this regional camp. You go to this regional camp, you get to go to this national camp.
Yeah.
And there's like 200 players. And they play this big video. And I know we were talking about James Van Riemsdyk.
Yeah.
They play this big video of like all the American stars that played there. And it's like this propaganda machine. You're just so jacked up about this red, white, and blue jersey.
Yeah.
And you see JVR, tipping pucks at the U.S. development team, and then they're showing them get taken second overall by the Flyers. And then they show you Patrick Kane, and he's upstairs in the stick handling room. And so what you end up doing, there's like 200 players in that room. They give you this big speech. Only 40 players will be invited to try out. And then only 20 players are going to make the team. And I still think, looking back, I've been through, numerous NHL camps now, but like one of the most, I felt anyway, the most highly scrutinized like scouting events I've ever been a part of was this 40 camp.
Wow.
It was brutally intense. We were 15 years old. You got kids taking helmets off and fighting.
Yeah.
We were, playing games. It's like there's a red USA team and a blue USA team because essentially there's two until they make their final cuts. And you go through this 40 camp. You're doing off ice with this boxing coach and things like that. And then eventually I was fortunate enough to be selected. And again, I always took the game super seriously, but now I was immersed in a culture where everybody else did too.
Yeah.
With their own taste.
Right.
And it was super cool to have that brotherhood. Purely hockey-wise, it had its challenges in terms of like ice time, and there's a lot more underneath the hood there specifically to hockey. But purely what it did for my work ethic, how it trained me to enjoy and embrace and know that competitions and judgment is just a matter of fact in pro sport. A lot of the life lessons that I honed and refined there, and really relationships, have been a gift ever since. It means something very deep to you to make that team. And then, like you said, you represent your country every day, and it's still a reward for me today.
That's amazing. And it's cool because I like understanding, studying human performance is something that I'm just like, that drives me, right? I want to know why people do certain things. That's something that has always fascinated me. Now, when you made that team and you're in high school, and now everyone else is also there too, I still think back to high school athletics or even college teams and even professional sports. Like there's still a flavor of flair in terms of there's funny, like locker rooms in sports are just the funnest thing in the game, right? That's ultimately you end up missing that to a large degree. Like connection, humor, personality types, stories. And then when you get in great cultures, it's like the greater good still aligns with max discipline and work ethic, and everyone wants to advance the herd, right? But when you're that young, how is that compared? Is that part of the process of weeding people out? And then what it would be like a positive or even maybe even a negative of being that driven at that age? And that's just a broad question. Could that be something that, do you think you want that to be so aggressive that it could weed you out of the process of playing for a really long time? Or do you want that to be the molding process that gets you to the NHL and then sticks you in the NFL or NHL?
It's interesting. I don't think it's perfect because I know as a kid, like my fire burned hot, man.
Yeah.
Like I played bad games and I was taught. It was like acceptable to be miserable and angry for your performance until you got the chance after a bad one to play well again.
Sure.
And I was a prisoner to my performance a lot growing up. The beauty of it was I was successful a lot because I was ultra competitive and I was athletic and I was putting the work in and I was detailed in my training and I worked hard. Mm-hmm. I did not go out. I was in on Friday nights. I was in the gym. But we all watched this I actually had it on JVR on my podcast, and we talked a lot about this Last Dance documentary, right?
Yeah.
And, you get insight into one of the most dominant athletes of all time across any sport.
100%.
Michael Jordan was magic. He was
Mm-hmm.
carnal. He was going to tear your throat out.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is that served him to win, 3 in a row, 2 separate times. But there was burnout there.
100%.
He retired twice.
Right.
And so I look at that and go, where can we hone all of the lessons from someone who's so graciously, shown some of his work in the climb. And so for me, it's really just been about establishing lanes
I love that.
instead of so much bleed over. So when I was a kid, my dad came home from work. He owns a real estate management company. I know he had some tough days at work where, clients weren't happy, and let him know that. And when he walked in the door, dad was home.
Yeah.
Not Jory Carrick of, Williamson Management.
Right.
Dad was home, and he nailed that. And, so as I get older, I really one of the catalysts in my career was when I was playing as a Toronto Maple Leaf.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I, we were fiancés, I guess is the term.
Yeah.
Before we were going to get married, I just was dragging her through the mud of my career. And I just, started to really make a decision from a mental preparation and versatility and agility standpoint that it's not her fault I passed the rock team tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And who am I affecting with this?
Right.
I can't, just because I go home and spoil movie night because I'm, throwing a fit, it doesn't help me erase the turnover, doesn't help me avoid it the next time. It wasn't serving me.
Yeah.
So I think, I've developed lanes where, I live in the hockey lane and I'm doing everything I can to improve and grow and maintain my career. And then I have, a personal lane, I have my relationships, so on and so forth. So for me, it's really been about establishing boundaries around high performance.
Yeah. Well, you said it. It's a great. You nailed that. First of all, I was trying to tee you up for that, and you just nailed it.
Thanks.
Because I wanted to get your perspective of that because you're still in it, which I think is a cool part for me to ask that because I'm outside of it now. So to be able to hear someone say that in it it's powerful. And I know a lot of people are going to listen to that, like sink that in, right? Because now. I use the example of Tiger Woods before The Last Dance even came out. It's like, yeah, Tiger Woods was amazing, but then do you want the backlash of a guy who, and I don't know Tiger Woods and I'm just using an example, but same thing of Michael Jordan. I also don't know Michael Jordan. I can just watch this and then you get to pick and choose what you would want to keep, what you wouldn't want to keep. And that's one of the hard parts about being so driven. And you see it happen in entrepreneurship. You see it happen in, like you said, like it could have been in real estate. So it's like success is beautiful, but then to what level of success are you going to allow that to quantify in yourself? And so if you are a great hockey player, but the relationship at home and movie night sucks, well, then where's the balance of fulfillment and joy? And I think that is what is so crazy to hear you break down so profoundly, like simple and yet profound, is that you did go into that environment at a young age. And that's kind of leading into, when did you learn that? Did that take the being in the Maple Leafs, or did you get that drive, take that to Team USA and go boom, 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 focus all efforts? And was there a transition period where it went like, I can focus all efforts, but I still need to have a balance? Or was that always with you because of your dad's influence or those sort of things?
Wasn't always with me. When I was
Yeah.
at the U.S. development team and even with the Plymouth Whalers, before I went professional, and then in my young, career, there were a lot of, sleepless nights.
Sure.
Countless low light reels playing in my head
Yeah.
late into the night. And, I think for me, it really just, it was when I was with the Toronto Marlies that it really clicked. So I get traded. I think it was 2016 to the Maple Leafs. I played like 19 games. I had a bonus at 20 games, which is why Lou Lamoriello sent me down. Guy got me.
Yeah, he got you.
Good for you, Lou. You got me. And then, so I get sent down for this Toronto Marlies playoff run, because I was AHL eligible.
Yeah.
And I knew in my time with the Leafs, I proved that I could swim. Like I could stay afloat in the NHL on a consistent basis. At least that's what I think I did.
Yeah.
And then with the Marlies, I was like, okay, it's time to, flex my ceiling and to show this. And because I know what I can do in this league, and I took off. I led the whole American League in playoffs and scoring. We didn't even make the finals, and I was a D-man. That was the best hockey I've ever played. But my resiliency at that time really boiled down to, I had a conversation. If, Connor Carrick, if you are so competitive, and if you care as deeply as you think you do, when you make a mistake, you will learn to get out of your own way. And you will learn, if you are so hell-bent on playing well, improving yourself, this indulgence in the mistake, this replaying, this like hyping of your failure, and all the attention you're going to give it, which is, sabotaging your energy. It's difficult to maintain confidence levels. If you are so smart like you think you are, you'll figure this out.
Right.
And I finally, that was really one of the purest places I've ever played from mentally, where there was just that ability to play well, good, fine, no problem. I got to do it again. Played poorly, it's over, no big deal. We're playing again tomorrow. And just the pace at which I was able to stay with my goals at that time. Like, that is something that when I'm scrambling, when I'm struggling later now in my career, I remember my habits then. How did I talk to myself then? And it's been a great guiding light in my mental routine ever since.
So how do you manage that mental stability or peace or calmness or understanding? We'll go with understanding. How do you handle or understand yourself mentally at the level in which you're performing? Because also, one thing that I think people realize is that you're a human, right? You're a human that goes out and performs at a high level, but you're a human, and so the human part of it, there's so many other stimulations of thought and opinion that comes in as you reach checkpoints in any field. As you raise the level of achievement, if you will, there's like another layer of stimulation that you're not used to. Like when you first get up to the NHL, you can get all the stories of what the NHL media is like or the intensity or the pressure, but until you get there, you just don't know. So it's an immediate uncertainty. So it's almost like you have to create stillness immediately. And you have to get to your mental game immediately, even as you improve and even as you get higher up in whatever field you're in. How do you, because you just said it right there, as I get later in my career, I remember my habits from earlier in my career, the lessons I learned earlier in my career that worked. So what was the controllable of stimulus from even your family, friends, your wife, like anyone closest to you, and then people outside of that close circle, because they all have input too. How did you learn how to navigate what to allow in and what to not allow in?
Oh man, I think the biggest, one of the biggest things that I wrestle with is this concept of like self-sabotage, right? Where we as people, we all know what's good for us, and we all know what'll make us money and why we'll have 8 abs and what'll make our home life. But it's the application. And it is that getting out of your own way that I think takes daily, if not hourly, if not like minutely attention. So for me, there's so many habits that I've tried to build over time that serve this purpose. So for example, I'm a health nut. I eat mostly like a paleo style diet, a lot of meat, tons of vegetables, and sweet potatoes and things like that. But I eat good. I don't drink much, that kind of thing. Well, like 7 years ago, to have a salad for lunch was punishment. Like it was this, oh my God, I hate myself, and I love my goals so much, I'm going to put myself through this.
Wow.
Now I love the nourishment, and it's second nature. So I think it's this way that I've built habits to get out of my own way that I'm probably the most proud of. So for example, in season, and that ranges everything from, and you're just building this toolbox, right? With all these things in it. So like maybe that day, it's meditation. Maybe I've got, 10, 15 minutes, go jump on a headspace. Maybe I don't have that much time, pre-game. I just got to jump in and do a cold immersion, just change the system. Something's got to go.
100%.
Do a cold tub, plunge or a cold shower. You know how it is. Like I eat good. All of a sudden I'm on the road. We get home at 2, 3 in the morning. I'm on 4 hours of sleep. I'm stressed out. I didn't play well. That sugar in the cabinet that I know has been there for the last 6 weeks is like calling my name.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I'm just trying to protect and get back to the brain that like Connor's friends with, that like we get along and my goals and my actions are in alliance there. And then just being able to like step off the ride and recognize like, okay, this is getting to a slippery slope. I'm not talking to myself in a good way. My brain's, very negative. Maybe you need a nap, meditation, ice bath, all the things I talked about.
Yep.
And it's really just, it is a huge asset to realize that there's even a toolbox that you can begin to engage with.
100%.
And then over time, everyone's got their thing, whatever it is. There's science to support everything nowadays in terms of what works. But just knowing that you have these sort of resources available to you if you're willing to invest in the education has been a massive investment to me without any idea of the scope of the return.
Wow. That's amazing, man. I mean, you hit on some strong points that as an athlete, it's just mind blowing to me, because it's like, I felt like I considered myself a hardworking athlete as well. And I did every edge chasing thing I could have in the book. And then when it all came crashing down, the lesson I learned from that now even this podcast, I try to share what you just said in a nutshell, or try to teach, is how do you decrease the slump of a performer to understand the tools they've been taught? Like we talked a lot about that with people that we work with when COVID hit and uncertainty hit, or whatever, the NHL, whatever you guys are doing, whatever it is, whenever these things, uncertainty, change, attention, or struggle hits you, you fall back to avoidance. That's like the sugar. I'm tired and fatigued, so let me grab the sugar because that'll energize me and make me happy for this moment. But then it's like that decision is going to drive you even deeper, so you don't understand the tool. So it's like you create this toolbox. How do you get people to understand the tools quicker? Because that would be wisdom, right? I mean, science, literature, knowledge, all the stuff that you can get, we're not short on. There's no shortage of knowledge out there, but there's shortage of wisdom and understanding what you personally need to do. I thought you said a great thing in there is, how do I become friends with Connor? And what an epic way of putting that. But you also touched on a lot of physical tools. So it's a psychological advantage, but you're physiologically using things like breath, cold immersion, nutrition, movement, sleep. And so a question I always ask people, so we'll see how you do here, but I always think of it as this: do you act yourself into thoughts, or do you think yourself into action? You know what I mean? So I'll say that again. Can you act yourself into thinking, that being the headspace, the actions of the nutrition, all that stuff, or do you think yourself into that? So it's more, would you waste time trying to consider good, positive self-talk and then maybe never act and just keep eating the Snickers in the cabinet? Or do you create actionable things that you trust? Which one becomes the layer of tools that you want to have a deeper understanding to?
I'd say probably action first. Just because as an athlete, I have a relationship with like the concept of inertia, right? And then just how exciting and this X factor that momentum is, So when's the last workout that you didn't want to do? And you can answer this, Harvey. Like, when's the last workout that you did not want to do, that you still did not want to do once you began to sweat?
This past Friday. I'll even go as this past Friday. It was most days, actually.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like the way, once you get momentum on your side, then you're in a position to act in alliance with your goals.
Yes.
But like for me, one of like what you're trying to do is create like signals that you need something. So for example, normally one of my signals, for example, is when I'm anxious, I become a clean freak. So I'm not a super organized person at home, but all of a sudden, like a couple of bad days at the rink, I'm in and out of the lineup, and I get home and it's like I need my space to be tidy. And it's like I've realized I've gotten older. There's a reason for that. It's not about the house. You can still clean the house. That's good too.
Yeah.
But like, don't kid yourself on what you're frustrated about. What's going on here?
Right.
So I'm just trying to allow for myself. Another great trigger is whenever I am resistant to like meditation or breath work, that's when you need it.
Yeah.
Like, so immediately, if it's like, if I'm able to catch the thought of I'm doing stuff, I'm busy today. I don't have time today.
Yeah.
And life's not all about sitting on the couch and doing breath work anyway. Like, at some point you got to do something, Connor.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, now I can tell, because you're being resistant to it, that you need a little dose. And so for me, and it is that wisdom over time. It's that wisdom and that application where, and side note, like, these are all how I catch myself. I've also tried to establish like relationships with friends who can help me get on my own way. I've also found coaching, to be a great resource, right? Like, I was training myself mostly on COVID, and now that gyms are starting to open up and things like that, there's no replication for good coaching,
Right.
and help having someone who has your best interest at heart to take you through the discomfort that you maybe naturally avoid. So for me, it's really just trying to identify those triggers on my own for when I need, some of the self-care, right? That's a term that's, popular right now.
Yeah.
And while also leaning on the expertise of others. I think those two together have helped me to develop, more athleticism mentally.
So do you think that when you're getting to the level of understanding, or you're, understanding I need a coach, or understanding I need X or X or X, or these sort of things, so right now, something that really I think about very often is right now what you think is right and you could be entirely off on. I think that humility is one of the quicker layers of getting to wisdom, right? Where you could get into the league right away and just be completely closed-minded, not asking questions, not curious to learn from somebody else. Players like this, like I, just know people that are just like, nope, this is my ways, boom. And then when that comes crashing down, there's no toolbox, right? So it's like your ability to learn from many different fields of people I've found to be rather successful, and you can touch on that too. But have you kind of seen it as, instead of trying to be extremely right in your routines or your habits or your nutrition, more so just trying to prove yourself a little bit less wrong, and just be able to see it as like, what I'm doing right now, I might shift in a year, but I have the confidence to be able to shift it. And that would mean that I'd have to be able to see that I was somewhat wrong about something I firmly believed in.
Yeah, I think at my core, I believe that I am a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
I believe in growth mindset. And I think I've done a good job attracting, people that are like that in my life professionally. But that also means if I'm working with you as a coach, for example, say I was working with you, Harv,
Yeah.
and I am in this in this mindset, and you are too. And if I feel that I've found a new way or a new coach or new something, I have to honor that, and
Yeah.
I've done that. I've done, different styles of training. I've hired, different people, and I'm not always a believer. I think there's, a tip of the cap to what's gotten you successful, and you have to, try and recognize and see the lessons. But what got you here won't always get you there. And as a professional, you've got to hold your convictions, lightly sometimes that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is a fine line. It's a fine line of doing, what's tried and true versus, what sounds sexy today. But what I always try to deal with is not like abstract, thoughts about where I can get better. I'm trying to look at concrete things, like who can I actually work with that I can get better? What is really sustainable, for what I'm doing, even on the nutrition side, right? Like I was working with a functional medicine, doc at the time,
Yeah.
and we had discussed intermittent fasting,
Sure.
right? Like do the 16 hours and the 8 hours. And I would do it, and I would feel good, and I was able to achieve some of my goals, like mental, better mental sharpness. My weight was more consistent. I wasn't as hungry or reaching for sugar and things like that. I feel like my insulin was better under control. But I also, like, no one's thanked intermittent fasting in their Hall of Fame speech. Like, it hasn't built careers, right? So like, how is the juice worth the squeeze? How obsessed am I getting with what's new versus like, what's the amount of athletes that have engaged in strength training where it kept their career. I mean, you look at, we'll go back to it. I just keep referencing it because everyone's pretty much watched it. But like, look at Jordan, when he started training versus when he came into the league as a boy. Like,
Right.
he was a monster all of a sudden.
100%.
So I think you have to have a healthy dose of skepticism with like a blend of humility to, I'll do anything to learn. I really will. If it means figure skating, if it means joining a gymnastics gym, if it means rolling around a jiu-jitsu mat, if it means taking boxing lessons, there's not a lot of rocks that I won't look under, for an edge. And really and you use the word curiosity.
Yeah.
Like, that's how we trained as kids.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Right? Like, how good can I get? What's my potential look like? Instead of in a pro environment, sometimes you get, hung up on expectation and I'm training and I'm strong and this should be easy kind of thing,
Well, you're right. I mean, curiosity is like the gift of a human almost, right? I mean, that's sort of it's like I've always thought about, and this is kind of off subject, but not really, but it's what separates us from any other species on the planet is our gift to think and have this conversation. Like, our ability to communicate and problem solve is what makes the human the hierarchy chain, right? I mean, it's like if lions and gorillas could communicate like humans, we'd probably be screwed, if they could do that sort of stuff, right? So that's sort of your gift. Like, your gift is to be curious. Your gift is to look at a bunch of different rocks and understand that this is Connor's gift to the world. And this is what else would I do besides try to maximize my mental capacity, my physical capacity? Like, there's an excitement to that, and if you can eliminate the external need to have things, then you have like the internal fulfillment of trying things, right? And then you just choose the platform you want to try things on. I mean, you're in the NHL, you have a great platform to serve people, to learn from people, to experience things, and then play at like a highly competitive environment with highly competitive people. You throw that into a pot, it's a pretty good mixture, And so now, like, using that and being curious is exciting, and that's something that I've been wanting to ask you, because what is really cool to me, and I'm getting to know you, but something that I've seen from afar is you have your hands in the pot of a lot of things. Like, you do run a podcast, you do speak and communicate educationally on things that you believe in, and you're also playing sports. So it seems from a viewpoint as like you're having your lane. And when you go to that lane, you want to be really good at that lane. So I want to be really good at hockey, but then I also want to be really good at podcasts. I really want to be good at understanding nutrition. I want to be really good at learning. And I don't really see that often, but I admire that about you. And that's something, have you done that because of curiosity? Did that just sort of innately happen? Or you just always had your hands in a lot of different things? Or do you feel like your ability to have hobbies that you take very serious and professionally outside of hockey make you better at hockey?
So I've thought long and hard about this, because I am inherently a very curious person. I'm just always evaluating where I'm at and where I want to go to and who can help me get there and how can I help them. And that's how the gears in my brain, work.
Yeah.
I would say initially my desire to really holistically, develop myself and my interest. Part of it was to improve at hockey. Part of it was avoidance. I was struggling to a point where I'm like, I just need a positive source of momentum in my life, and I'm not getting it from the sport.
Sure.
And so part of it, was avoidance. Part of it was also fear. I'm going through this, current career that has, great leverage points. People will pick up the phone. People are super excited to talk to a current player, that knock on the door to have a conversation similar to what we have. Like, these are the types of conversations that I'm having over on, my podcast it's just louder when you're a current player versus a retiree.
Yeah.
And I do feel that every lane where excellence is currently ongoing in my life does lead to like an energy upgrade.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's super easy to understand when you think of like, so I'm married. Right before you leave for the rink in the morning for practice, you have a big fight with your wife, like huge energy leak. 100%. It's on you. It's hard to shake. You try to compartmentalize. I struggle with that sometimes. versus, when things are good at home, there's just a brightness and a lightness to your effort or attitude. You take for granted until you fight again.
Yeah.
And so, for me, it was just about trying to establish and bring over habits that I've built in hockey, that would lend themselves to other things that I think I'm good at,
Yeah.
and that I really enjoy. I really enjoy podcasts. I really enjoy having good, friendships and things like that. So it's really about, curiosity, trying to maximize, leverage, um, all off the back of, at first, it was just a little bit of avoidance. I couldn't deal with the fact that I was frustrated. I couldn't deal with the fact that I was feeling like I was failing. And that's kind of just the dark side, good side of being ambitious, right?
100%. Well, and that's
It's
kind of what
kind
we
of a
touched.
tool.
Yeah, that's what we touched on about success. You can become like addicted to success or achievement, and that doesn't mean that you're healthy. I mean, it's like as someone who looks extremely in shape, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're healthy. Someone could be addicted to the weight room, and that could turn into a bad thing. You use the term of, I don't want to be a prisoner to X, right? Or, well, so you don't want to be a prisoner to the game of hockey. You got to be able to leave hockey. But when you get programmed at an early age and you have that drive, what I think is hard as an athlete is when you already mentioned, when I was 9, I wanted to do this, and I had this conversation with my dad. But at the same time, for your whole life, you envisioned playing under those lights in that arena. And now you get to that arena. So it's kind of a two-part question. Like, one, as you get older, I think it's important to experience things while you're in the thing, because if you don't, you fall into a fragileness of identifying only with hockey, because as that little kid, that's what you've always found happiness out of. So to be able to like be curious about things outside of the sport, you just said it, like raises excellence in even hockey. If I'm a really good husband, then I'm probably going to be a better hockey player. Does that make sense? Those translators sort of deals of how you.
Yeah, it's like you've got like this poised portfolio that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
And when you have other positive sources of momentum in your life, you are just more, bulletproof to the tough day, because
Mm-hmm.
you've hedged. You have different arms,
Yeah.
and facets to yourself. And I think it also just, comes down to, um, being human. And I really enjoy sort of the process of building other parts of myself consciously, because a lot of, my mental like habits and ups and downs within the sport are a little on the unconscious side, because these are patterns I've had since I was 6.
Right.
Like, I wanted coach's approval when I was 6, and I would, become anxious when I'd get yelled at. It's like that has still, progressed into, my professional career in certain times.
Mm-hmm.
Versus some other areas of my life, I could just sort of consciously build good habits from the start,
Yeah.
because I'm older, I'm more mature, and then you can learn things across different fields. And that's how I love self-educating that way. Like, I love reading, a good business book. Like, I love listening to, gosh, the ups and downs, and we're seeing it with COVID. Imagine the CEO that has 1,000 employees,
Right.
and the man or woman has to lay off 1,000 people. Like, and I think my job being on pause is hard.
Right.
It is. I'm not saying it's not,
Correct.
but there's a lesson to be learned there. And whether that's, military books, stories of, guys that have gone to war and gone on to do things, and the
Yeah.
adversity they've been through. Like, I enjoy borrowing across other platforms. I spoke to on my podcast this, Zach Bitter. He's the world record holder in the 100-mile run. So I'm like, Zach, like, where does that start?
Yeah. Like, what? Take me
And
through
he's
that.
like, I just do it. I'm like, wait a second, we got a lot to unpack here, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of people, put their gym shoes on every morning and don't go 100 miles. So we
Right.
got to talk about like how you got to this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like what I was thinking about, when I was learning, about training during, COVID times is, I struggled at first with, as hockey players, we always know when the next game is.
Yeah.
We know training camp is September 15th.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Olympians train for like 4 years before they get a chance to air it out.
100%.
Right. So like I was trying to borrow from, their mindset a little bit. And I just think, different places or of success leave clues that are different than others. They're just because of the different nature of what they're, competing or doing.
And no, I agree I believe in that tremendously. I actually, as a coach, I feel like I get more resources and information from outside of my field. I study surfing and running more than I study baseball, or whatever a hockey guy needs for strength or whatever that is. I would get more from a surfing community in terms of breath and control of management, emotionally management, military. I mean, I was very fortunate to spend some time with a lot of our SEALs in February and like listening to the way they train, the way they think, and then taking that out of. And I think the value of that is not feeling like you have to be that guy who runs 100 miles to be successful in your own right, but can I ask that person a question to get them to dive into that? And then now I can peel into that and have the success that leaves clues, like you said, and apply that to my own toolbox. And I think that that's like the value of picking many different fields of investing your time and your energy and your curiosities. Now, as an athlete, and something that you've touched on a lot about, just like your energy and having the lanes fulfilled and being in this position of excellence, as you've moved through the course of your career and had some success in the NHL, and now you've kind of got some years in it and you've got some clout, if you will, in terms of the professional hockey world, how have you, I'm sure it's still something that you're kind of over now, but how have you demystified NHL hockey? How did you make it to USA? You go through the ringer, you go to the draft, you do that sort of situation, then you get called up, get sent down, then you get called up and you playing up and you have your career. When you get up there and you took your mental game and you created habits, a lot of that had to be like demystifying and making things very real and relevant to yourself. Has that been part of the process too, as demystifying the fact that I am in the NHL? I need to get away from that and get back to playing hockey.
Yeah, I mean, I think at first, the first time I ever remember like boxing out Sidney Crosby, like I thought I was gonna like go through a hologram,
Yeah.
right? Like you just have such an element of celebrity, and you've seen these guys on TV,
Yeah.
and there's like just uber amounts of respect for them as a player, and it's like, but over respecting them is going to help them have success against you, which is not what they're paying you to do tonight. They're not paying you to gawk at, Sidney Crosby. They're paying you to defend them. So every day you're in the club, you feel more a part of the club,
Sure.
which is, really cool. There's no sort of alternative to experience. And really like where I'm at in the NHL is trying to consistently highlight my assets. So I need to do a better job to take the next step in my career of playing to my strengths, while, sort of being able to minimize some of the blips. And I understand that, particularly to my, position as a defenseman, just how, detailed a game I have to be, how high my energy level has to be night in, night out, some of the, non-negotiables. So for example, one of my assets as a player is I'm a good defenseman at the offensive blue line. I have offensive, talents and gifts. The facts are most NHL head coaches are not making a decision on what six defensemen they're dressing based on their offensive blue line play.
Sure.
It usually starts more on the defensive side of the puck with their gap control and how they're able to defend, down low defense, get the puck back. And then sort of the next step is breakout. So like those now are the big three things. I've just gotten more clear on what my brand is, what, people need from me on a night to night basis.
Sure.
And just I'm more focused on, I value it more closely on those things now than I ever did.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, how, when you get to the league, is there like a passage of the torch of how to get people to that level of thinking that you just mentioned? Like when you get a guy who's a rookie, what's the atmosphere in the locker room of, are you guys trying to tell somebody that right away? Like, hey dude, you got to break this framing, or is that something more of like unspoken, like it's kind of like figure that out on your own?
It's both. It's the coach's job first. Like
For sure.
his job is to get the best out of each individual. And sometimes as the individual, you're only bringing like the successes and failures you've had and what you're good at. So, maybe you haven't been challenged to, be particularly, if you're an offensive player, to check and be hard to play against. Frankly, you probably always had the puck, so you never had to play defense,
For sure.
at the younger ages. So it's just kind of the natural evolution. Like for me anyway, there were a couple like really big things that I had to break. So in the American League, I was a really high end offensive player.
Okay.
Which meant that I was defending less. I was on the power play a lot, so just generally, my feel and things like that were, kind of humming at a higher clip. Well, at the NHL level, if I ever wanted to touch the puck, like I had to be better defensively, or else I was never going to get it and never get to play, to my assets.
Yeah.
So sometimes the game just presents answers for you. So there's an element to that. And then the other end is like, coaches, hey, Connor, you're spending a lot of time in your own end. Like you've got to be faster, harder to play against in your own zone.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're not going to get it back. And it's different for every player. And there is sort of, it's almost like with the Last Dance, the Dennis Rodman clip. It's actually funny. That reminded me of JVR because, James Van Riemsdyk has such a niche in the NHL. He's so elite.
Yeah.
From that hash mark area down. I mean, how many goals does he have? Raising both arms overhead. It's unreal. And you see that green mouth guard. It's who he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
At younger levels, was James likely able to carry the puck more and create more goals on his own from distance? Yeah, but it's not how he's mostly scored a lot of his goals in the NHL. With Dennis Rodman, like, was he always a rebounder, or was he probably a more talented player earlier, like in his college and high school career?
Yeah,
he didn't have to rebound because he was the one taking the shot.
100%.
But there's this level of niche that comes into the NHL where it was like, all through my life, all growing up, I identified as a power play guy, I identified as an offensive player. Well, then I get to the Washington Capitals and they have Mike Green, who's making $6 million and like X30 goal scorer, and John Carlson, who's on pace to make $10 million. Both right shots to run their power play. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the other spot I would play, Alex Ovechkin standing there.
Yeah, good luck.
So which of those three guys, whose job am I taking there?
Right. Wow.
And then I get traded to Toronto, another top 5 power play. Right?
Yeah.
You
guys
Morgan
were
Riley,
loaded
Jake Gardner.
too when you were with them. Right?
Loaded.
Yeah, loaded.
Loaded. I mean, on the flanks, you've got Marner, Austin Matthews, elite, 40, 50 goal scorers. And then, I go to Dallas and they've got, this Miro Iskin, a 19-year-old all-star, and Jonathan Klingberg again. So now all of a sudden it's been 4 or 5 years since I've run a power play, and you're not a power play guy anymore. So it's like, now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes circumstance will give you the answer. Sometimes it's an older player saying, hey, you're playing on my line, and if you want to do that, I need you to play defense kind of thing.
For sure.
And then, hopefully the last resort would be a coach saying you're not doing X, Y, and Z, and you're not going to be in our lineup or play much if you can't do these things.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That's a great breakdown. To kind of, before I take you through what we call our Diamond Series, I want you to look at it as, as you're saying a lot of amazing things. It's really cool to really have you break this down and put a perspective from my lens of how life looks at that angle. When you do a lot of things that, from what I've gathered, you're pretty, I would consider you an edge chaser, right? Which is a lot of like the JVRs out there, a lot of the people that are within MindStrong as well. Brian Peters was in the NFL for many years. He's one of my best friends who also does a lot of stuff with us. One of the massive edge chasers. I've seen these guys up close and I've watched them really work hard to like articulate and understand the next choice they would make and the decision they're going to make, and then look into why would they make that choice. Something that I like to ask people like yourself is, when you're in an environment where you're with high elite people that are edge chasers in their own right, but then you're very curious about something that maybe isn't necessarily agreed with or is different. What does that take on a personal level to be able to sustain the ability to like see it through? Like breath work, for a perfect example. Like, what is that at a personal level to be able to see that through, that you feel like that helps you in all different areas of life? Same thing with your diet, maybe. If it's a little bit different and you are so close niche with these people, how have you learned to have that confidence to be like, okay, 1, I got to break an identity on the ice. 2, I'm curious about this edge that I think can help me, and I need to see that through. And then 3, I need to implement everything, right? How have you handled that?
It's belief driven. Like, I just believe, that I am, and I ascribe to this identity that I am the type of person who is comfortable and feels compelled to do anything and everything it takes to be my best.
Yeah.
And I think there's a secret edge there where if I present myself wholeheartedly, this is who I am, full disclosure, you guys aren't, there's no like ego, I'm trying to make you think anything about me kind of
Sure.
thing. There is a relaxing of the shoulders of everyone around you.
Mm.
And so that I've had the gift of being traded a couple times. I did not present who I was right away. I was nervous that they would find out I was one of the weird ones,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
and keeping up that facade is fatiguing. It's tiresome, and
1,000%.
it's you're a fraud. Everyone knows it. They can
Right.
see it. So as I've gotten older, I've frankly become more comfortable, and I like myself better.
Yeah.
I'm more grateful for the nooks and crannies of my personality versus wishing I was a different way.
Yeah.
And I think that struggle to accept yourself as an athlete, because a lot of this edge chasing stems from what, like this core belief that I must be better. It's never satisfied. I'm not what I could be.
Right.
And there can be a dark edge there.
Yeah, we talked about that.
But once
Right.
you reposition yourself as someone, hey man, I'm just infinitely curious. And like, aren't you too? Like, aren't you genuinely curious what your potential looks like? Would you like to, meet that person, have it be somebody else? Or would you like to meet your potential, someday and be staring in a mirror kind of thing?
Yeah, I know that's some stoic philosophy in there too. I love that.
So I just, I don't know, man. I realized I was more comfortable with myself. I like myself better. And I found out that other people like me better too. And I was just wholly honest and, didn't pretend.
No, that's powerful, and I think that segues well into the Diamond Series. So I'll give you a quick, brief history of it, and then we'll run you through it. So we run all our guests through what we call the Diamond Series. When we first started MindStrong, this is what all the boys, we sort of created this, and we started speaking on this years ago, and this is when we started a podcast a few years ago. This was going to be a lot of our backbone to it, and a lot of it stemmed from everything we're talking about. We had Dave Fisher, who was gopher, first-round pick for the Canadians. He's now playing over in Austria. Very good friend of mine. Brian Peters was in the NFL at the time, and hopefully he gets another shot at that, depending on what happens in the current, society. And then we had Steve McGuigan, Tom Buski. All these guys were minor league baseball players. And we started this company with the platform of our podcast, and how do we learn from people like yourself? I mean, that was the objective. Be curious, educate, share education. That sounds like a great way to go. And with the premise of the Diamond Series, which was the thing of, this was an awareness factor. So how do you enhance your self-awareness? You do it through questions, right? So it's a subjective thing to begin with, but always repeating the question, because you're hopefully evolving over time. So your answers, never, the essence of it is your answer's never the answer today, but it's part of where you've brought it to today. And so we take that first and foremost as you ask the person, what is your purpose, in the sense of, how do you identify with yourself? How do you service people with that identification? And then most importantly, what are you willing to struggle for? So when you think about that, Connor, take out necessarily hockey. Don't necessarily look at that as hockey, because that'll end, right? That'll be, someday that'll end, and you have that mirror opportunity all the time. But when you think about your life as a husband, as a friend, as a person who pushes health, which I'm in huge support of in general, when you think about yourself in life, what is it that you identify with in that service to others? And then what do you feel very meaningful that's worth struggling for in your life? Like, what do you find purpose out of struggle in?
I think, my purpose today, man, is to really enable and empower people, and people can be family, people can be teammates, people is definitely myself, to be their highest being. And you just know it. When you're in a sweet spot in your relationship, when you've caught a rhythm in your career, when you've, you're just kind of humming on all cylinders. My goal is to be first a shining example, and to lead by example with, whether it's my podcast, whether it's my hockey career. And then I would say the struggle I'm willing to go through is I am willing to risk everything to do that.
Wow.
And what I mean by that is I am willing to, the night I announced my podcast, I wanted to throw up.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
And I mean, fear of judgment. That's what I do for a living. Like we play in front of 30,000 a night. No problem. There's 2 GMs on both sides, where every single game you are either, both GMs are evaluating. I would like that guy on my team. Nah, I could pass on that guy.
Mm-hmm.
You are constantly judged and poked and prodded. But for whatever reason, I was the first, current NHL player, so I was just kind of stepping out of the tribal norm. And I heard all the voices. Who does this guy think he is? Why would he do it? And you know how it is. It's a podcast. It's not this big scary thing.
Right.
There are conversations like this.
Yeah.
Just repackaged and given to others to repurpose for their own life.
Mm-hmm.
And the reward has been massive. Either close friends or family or complete strangers have, reached out and let me know that they are going back to that original goal. They feel and are taking real action towards being better versions of themselves. And I think the grand scheme of all this is I know in my head, one, how impressionable I am and how influenced I am by the people that I know and love and respect.
Yeah.
While also knowing that I can take progress, I can take steps towards being my best self. When I'm in that zone of, I'm able to take that motivation and move it into, skill development or nutritional execution, whatever. So that's kind of my 2-pronged answer.
No, that's powerful, man. I mean, I'm thankful for your podcast because I found you through your podcast, and I thought my first thought was that is badass that this guy's doing that, because I just think of the value of challenging yourself in other areas. There's no way that doesn't serve you benefit, whether it's good or bad. The fact that you acted on it, you have a platform to first and foremost learn, which is awesome. But then two, like you do expose yourself. So like through exposure, that's like ice training to a large degree, which I know you do, right? Like exposure to the cold is a lesson to yourself. It's a teacher to you. Same thing with meditation and on and on and on. But I think that was what was so cool to me. Was I thought to myself, this guy's doing this in the middle of his career, advancing himself and exposing himself, and he's also thinking outside of practicing hockey. I thought that was just phenomenal. So, that's amazing. I admire that. So when you take that down and you look at that as a set of standards, right? Mentally, emotionally, and physically, you already said it, to be able to go out on that stage and get judged, to be able to go home and be able to handle the judgment, good or bad, you got to be able to kind of even yourself out quickly, right? That's that decrease into the slump, increasing your ability to have a higher level of wisdom, all these sort of things. When you look at, and you've mentioned this a lot, but to break it down, like what is the things that you objectively have to check off in a day, or that minute to minute thinking of yourself, being friends with Connor at a mental, emotional, and physical level? What are those like your non-negotiables inside that bucket that you just are going to get done regardless? Because that allows you to be able to handle the stuff that's going to take place.
I think it's deep focus. Like that's a value of mine where I don't want to be at the gym, working on my game, working on my craft, thinking about what's going on at home. I don't want to be at home, guilty for being home, thinking I should be back at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So deep focus in that concept, of boundary that we talked about. That's definitely a core value. I would say, let me think. But basically, I try to simplify it. There's 3 realms of my life that I think where I can be of service. One, I can serve myself. I need to be my very best, so that I can do number 2, which is serve my family.
Mm-hmm.
My wife sleeps more soundly at night if my career's successful and goals are being scored and I'm playing well and money's coming in the door and all these other things, as well as attention at home and that sort of thing. And then 3 is I genuinely want to serve others. And part of this was born out of COVID. I did think a lot of people are out of work. A lot of value is a lot of brilliance isn't being allowed to express itself in the world right now because jobs are shut down and things like that. What do I do as an athlete? I chase a frozen puck, piece of rubber around a sheet of ice.
Yep.
That's just not that profound in this light.
Right.
Like it's
Right.
absolutely special to be an athlete.
Yeah.
But what problem do I solve? What value do I really create in the world? So, the podcast and the self-development outside the rink was really about, selfishly, I didn't want to be a taker from everything in community. I knew I was taking from the podcast world, and I was taking from the educators I looked up to, and I wanted to give. And
awesome.
frankly, I just know how damn hard it is to get better at something.
Yeah.
And I know how easy it is once you have access to the right tutor or the right coach or the right framework to get out of your own way and start getting after it.
Yeah.
And I just, I handle the responsibility seriously. I have been through a lot. I've built this career that's successful. Still think there's, better there to be had. But I know for sure I've definitely gathered a lot of like lessons, tried and true, that I can repackage and give to others that'll really help them wherever they are in their journey.
Yeah.
So really for me, it's as simple as that.
Dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited to hear this last one because I think you're on a roll. But when you think about the future, and you've just sort of mentioned it, of hopefully this keeps rolling, and hopefully it does. But as the platform grows, the opportunity to serve grows too, which I'm sure is a huge factor of internal purpose as well, right? And so as you look at yourself in the future, the carrot out in front that gets you excited, what does that look like? And that also, even challenge yourself to go outside of hockey as well. Stay inside the umbrella of hockey, I'm sure. But in an overarching theme, if you were to start with the end and be able to do the old rocking chair, I did it story, what is the person that you want to build? What's the carrot out in front of Connor that's exciting you to just keep pushing, keep developing mentally, emotionally, physically, being a good person, chasing. And then also, having the awareness to appreciate it all and understand it all in the process of it. What does that look like?
I have a wife. We'd like to have kids at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to play 1,000 games. That's a big
Wow.
number for me. I never really felt like I was a part of the NHL club until I played 200.
Sure.
No one knew. It wasn't like some crazy milestone. But I never really felt like, I'd really made it until I hit that number. No one gave me that number. I don't know why in my head it was, such a pivotal point, but I felt it. I would love to, have a secondary form of revenue, frankly, because in hockey, you're kind of like, there's like this wand in these GM's hand in which you're worth this or you're worth that. And it's sort of this abstract relationship with value versus this podcast. If I'm able to make a big impact with people and really gift them something, there can be attention or opportunities, to monetize it. I think a lot of that would help me with the, scarcity of knowing that this game does end at some point.
Yeah.
And I don't want to bury my head in the sand and pretend that day's never coming.
Right.
And the bills don't stop coming. So just from an ability to transition from scarcity to abundance, I would love to have, I feel like I'm called to coach. I feel like I'm called to lead. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. Like I kind of just always did. I love coaching. I know how hard it is to get better, and I love helping other people do it. And then you'll like this. One of my other dreams would be on the mental health, like advocacy side. I'd love to create like a charity. It's almost like imagine like a music festival or like a circus for like mental health shifts.
Yeah.
So you could buy a ticket. As soon as you walk in, you can get your, chaga tea station or whatever instead of a beer. And then it's like over here is like a Juve light, and yeah, exactly. Over there's a Juve light.
Yeah.
And go sit in there for 20, 30 minutes in front of the light, see how you feel. There's an infrared sauna. Here's like an XPT style like fire and ice thing. See how you feel after that. Here's a meditation group. Here's a yoga class, and you just kind of sit around all day and talk with like-minded people, and just to go through, without ideally like all the revenue goes to mental health charity that I align with at the time, but just to like expose different people to resources they may not have otherwise known about or had. And I mean, think about it. We do it with music festivals. People go get drunk and get all blitzed up and stuff. Like this is less crazy than that.
Hell, I'll be there. So you ever get that thing rolling, I'll be there for you. No, it's That's amazing, man. I mean, I love that. I mean, there's a lot of synergies. So, I mean, it's easy to agree with what you're saying, right? Because I obviously believe in a lot of that stuff, but it's really cool, man. I got it. You were very receptive, amazing to connect with right on. It was cool to see some of the people that we kind of knew. I think that always sort of aids in the process of being able to dive
Mm-hmm.
deeper into getting to know people anyways. But then more so to learn your story and hear you speak, I admire the way that you go about the career in the career, and I whatever happens after that, so be it. It's cool to see you doing this in the career. That's something that inspires me to even think about my own life. That's kind of a success leave clues of what can I do inside my window. Because when I do things as an entrepreneur, I think of it just like I did when I was a baseball player. All in, figure it
Yeah.
out, go, 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 go. Excellence, execute, all that stuff. And then you also need to be a good person. And you can get swayed in so many directions, right? And I think to hear you kind of talk through some of these concepts, it's very clear to see that you spend a great deal of thought in why you do what you do, and that's a cool thing to be a part of have a conversation with you. So for myself and everyone else on MindStrong, there's more than myself that's involved in this, and I always like to thank those guys for believing in the system too. But from all of us, thank you for the time, man. That's one of the greatest forms of leadership is your time. So to give us that, super cool. Super grateful of it, and I'm excited to keep following you and supporting you, and whatever happens with hockey. I don't know if you guys go back anytime soon or whatnot, but beyond that, man, keep pushing at all angles, because this was really fun to learn about you, and I know a lot of people are going to benefit tremendously out of hearing your words.
No, Harvey, thanks, man. And hey, fast friends, and consider me a resource. Reach out anytime. Had a blast. Talking about this kind of stuff and championing, mental and physical, fitness and health in today's world is nothing short of, the work of miracle workers. So good on you for that and taking that on, and, appreciate all that you're trying to bring to the world too, man. So it turned out great. Thanks for, having me on, and, we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely, man. All right, well, Connor, where can people find you when as they can kind of get a hold of everything that you got going on?
Yep. The Connor Carrick podcast is on everywhere from YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere that I know I've ever listened to a podcast. It's on there. My producer, Colin Steingart's awesome about that. At Connor Carrick on Instagram and Twitter. I'm working on my LinkedIn profile. Someone told me I need to work on that, but I haven't finished it
There
yet.
you
So I'll
go.
be there, I guess, eventually.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, man, that's where I'm at.
Well, go look them up, and I look forward to sharing this. So enjoy the day, folks, and cheers.